Hello, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Adam Ortlieb. I work in product marketing here at CalAmp, and I'm very excited to have our esteemed guest speaker join us. Trace Tolby is the Director of Transportation for Gilbert Schools in Arizona. And the topic of today's discussion is actually based on kind of a thought-provoking statement that Trace made to me in preparation for this session, specifically that technology is more important than the actual buses themselves. So we're actually pretty interested and excited to hear more about his perspective on that statement. So just to give you a little snapshot of CalAmp, just in case you're not familiar, we are a global provider of fleet telematics and IoT solutions. We have offices around the world, and specifically in student transportation, we service over 500 school districts around the United States, and we currently manage over 100,000 vehicles. Just a little information on our speaker today. Again, Trace is the Director of Transportation for Gilbert Public Schools. He has extensive experience in student and commercial fleet transportation. He's held a variety of roles in terms of training, sales, operations, management, and he has a degree from the University of Phoenix. A little background on Gilbert Public Schools. It's not a new district. Looks like they've been around for about just over 110 years. They currently operate with approximately 35,000 students, and they have a fleet of just under 250 vehicles. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our guest speaker, Trace, and he's going to talk about many of the challenges that his team and he have faced and are facing now, along with the solutions and some of the results that they have seen thus far. Trace?
Well, thank you for having me, Adam. Just like everybody in student transportation, safety is everything. It's at the core of what we do. It's the only thing that we do, and it's the most important thing that we do. It's everything. Everybody we haul is somebody's child, and it's the most precious gift that they have in their life, and we're entrusted to keep them okay. So safety has got to be at the core of everything that we do. We're not hauling dog food. We're not hauling soup cans. We're hauling kids. So with that being, said, safety is got to be at the core of it. Every morning we haul 10,000 kids in 70 minutes, and we do the same thing in the afternoon. And then of course, during the day, we have a variety of midday runs and private day schools that we service and stuff like this. So it's a lot of kids on board that we're responsible for their safety. Hauling freight and hauling other things, you get a 99% success ratio, and you're kind of celebrating. With students, that's not good enough. 99.999% is not good enough. You forget one kid, and that's somebody's child. That's somebody's life. And so we have to be 100% perfect every run, every day, every time. And that's a challenge. There's not many businesses in this world that have to be perfect every time, but student transportation is one of them. And obviously tracking the vehicles, knowing where they're at and where they're going, drivers showing up to work, all of that is huge in the grand scheme of things, of the challenges that we face. There's not a district in America, I'm sure, that has enough drivers, and we're certainly one of them. We're down drivers constantly. Then when you have the drivers, how do you manage that staff? A lot of our drivers are retired. They already have their income, and these are people that are working for something to do. That takes a different style of HR management to handle those kind of people versus somebody that really wants their job, you know. And that managing how many people show up on a daily basis, you know, every day we have 30, 40, 50 people out or spots open, and it's tough. Those 10,000 kids still got to get to school, whether I am fully staffed or whether I've got 20 people out. We still got to get them to school. So it's always a challenge. Driving incidents, you know, with 250 vehicles on the road, you're going to have accidents. We do about 2.5 million miles a year. There's accidents, there's incidents, there's stuff going on inside the bus. You know, driver driving 84 elementary kids, he can't see everything, he can't manage everything. There's always going to be stuff going on in the back of the bus, on the side of the bus, inside the bus, fights, bullying, drugs, you name it. It's going to happen in the bus, you know. So those are those that, you know, kind of the students, we try our best, but, you know, kids are kids. They're going to be wild sometimes.
Gotcha.
You know, navigation, you know, I always tell the story when I first started driving a school bus for the very first time, and I'm going through training, they hand me this paper map. And of course, at my age, I'm holding it way out here, trying to read the map as I'm driving a 40-foot bus through construction and through traffic and everything else. You go, what the heck are we doing? This is backwards, you know, and the maps are hard to read. And, you know, if the driver does that route all the time, it's not a big deal. They know the routes. But for somebody new coming in, it's tough, and I think it's dangerous. You know, in Arizona, our rules that concern school buses haven't been updated since 2008. So a lot of the newer technology is not allowed according to Arizona minimum standards. So we have to go ask for everything that we're going to do. We have to get a written exemption so that we're able to do it in a bus. And it's just tough to do with all of these challenges.
Interesting. Just tying back to the driver shortage, you mentioned that you're actually stepping in and doing some driving, at least early on. Is that something that you're finding it's kind of all hands on deck? Is
it's absolutely all hands on deck. You have to. I've got all of my mechanics drive all regularly. My shop staff drives as far as parts, and my shop foreman and my fleet manager does. My routers drive, field trip people drive, dispatch drives, my assistant director drives, I drive. You know, when you got to get those 10,000 kids to school and not everybody shows up, it's all hands on deck.
Gotcha.
Parent calls and communication, you know, every morning our dispatch office is just buried in phone calls. And it's a good thing in a way, because parents are calling and saying my son doesn't need a ride, or my daughter only needs a ride home and not a ride to school, or something like this. But it's a lot of phone conversations. The radios are going nuts in the morning with all the drivers figuring out what they're doing and where they're going. There's drivers at the window, there's field trips leaving, there's coaches picking up buses. Everything goes on in the morning. And it's hard without technology to deal with all of that stuff. You know, and everybody's got an app, and apps don't always work. And a lot of parents that are older, or grandparents that are watching their kids, don't care for the technology much. You know? So we're dragging them kicking and screaming into it.
But you mentioned the phone calls. Do you have a sense of what kind of volume that was happening prior to this transition?
I don't really have a sense of the exact volume, but I would say close to 200 phone calls a morning. and that's between 4 people, and that's with the radio traffic and the drivers and stuff like that. So it's really hectic inside that office.
Okay.
Pre-trips, pre-trips are notoriously hard to do with school buses. A lot of school bus drivers just don't do real proficient pre-trips. It's kind of the nature of the beast. We push, we try to enforce, we walk out in the yard and make them do them and stuff like this. But the old way with the paper books, we'd end up with 250 little pieces of paper every day that the driver scribbled on it, throw them into a box, and somebody has to go through that box and pick out the ones with, maybe light bulbs out or, some minor infractions on it that now the shop has to get involved and get those fixed. And it's really cumbersome. The other thing is, how do you ensure that somebody's doing their pre-trips? Well, then you got to dig through all those 200 pieces of paper looking for one specific driver to see what they did. And it's just unmanageable without technology,
Okay. How about stop arm violations?
Yeah, stop arm violations are rampant, and it's everywhere. And especially Phoenix is such a big city, and being part of that Phoenix metro area, they just run your stop arm constantly. Unfortunately, in Arizona, we're allowed to have the stop arm cameras, but the police in Arizona will not use our video as evidence. So they don't do anything with it. So we have not put on stop arm cameras. If they would change that law, I would push to get them on as fast as I could get them on. But they just don't seem to. Arizona's a little behind the times when it comes to stop arm violations.
Understood. Yeah, and I think that's the last time I checked, it was something like 26 states allowed it. So there's still a bit of ground to be made up in terms of allowing that from a compliance standpoint.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for taking us through that. Now we're excited to hear about some of the solutions that you've put in place and kind of, any kind of results that you're seeing, anything that is still a work in progress. And even more importantly, I guess maybe you can start with just kind of elaborating on our positioning here that technology is more important than the buses themselves.
Well, and the whole reason I had made that comment to you in the first place is I've spent 15 years working on the dealership side. And through those 15 years, I worked for the Bluebird dealership here in Arizona, and then for the Thomas dealership in Arizona. Your whole life is centered around the bus. Your whole life is centered around what specs the bus have and how it performs and what engine's in it and how it's equipped and what seats it has in it and the row spacing. And it's just all of the stuff that goes into building the bus. And it's important. The bus is hugely important. But when I've switched sides and I got into the school district side and you start running those, the challenges that I face with parents calling and with the accountability to the parents as well as to the school and everything else, I found myself realizing that you just go, if the bus starts and runs, it's safe. I'm not really worried about what tire size is on that bus. And I'm not really worried about what gear ratio the bus has. I'm worried about, is it safe and it's running? Great. But now my biggest challenges are, how do I answer those accountability questions to the parents, to the schools, to the administration? And technology is how you do that. It's how you manage it. Vehicle tracking, it's like, I got to know where the buses are. That's a given. And you kind of hope that they're running their routes and they're doing the right thing. But the history is a huge part. You get citizen complaints about he was speeding. Well, I can look up and say, yeah, he was, or no, he wasn't. And why did your bus go down this way? Well, I can tell you, yes, he did, or no, he didn't. And I have the history of exactly when he opened the door and when he turned on his red lights and how fast he was going and all of those, you know, things that you might get the calls on. You have the data and you have the proof. So vehicle tracking is amazing to have, as far as that history goes. Cameras, the cool thing about cameras is cameras don't lie, they don't embellish, they don't stretch the truth, and they don't make up stuff. And when you're dealing with kids, sometimes they embellish and sometimes they make up stuff and everything else. So it's kind of nice to have really good cameras. We've got all HD cameras and 8 camera systems in big buses and great audio and video. And we use it as protection for our drivers, but we also use it as what actually happened when the parent calls up and my kid's getting bullied. We can pinpoint it down and say, yeah, or, well, no, your kid was the bully, sometimes, but we have proof. We have individual proof that we can supply to the principals, to administration, sometimes to the police, if something got out of hand. But cameras are amazingly vital in our situation.
So internal surveillance, how about dash cams? Are you using those as well?
Yep. On that 8 camera system for an 84 passenger bus, we'll have 1 dash cam and 7 interior.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
of course, the first interior bus camera has the step well as the driver, so we can do some driver management and what happens in the step well, and the rest are just mainly focused on the kids.
Gotcha.
With that camera focused on the driver, obviously we can see driver behavior. We can tell if they're wearing their seatbelt. We can tell if they're on their phone. We can tell if he's sleeping. If we can tell whatever they're doing, we can see it, providing we go look for it, and we don't necessarily use it as a gotcha. I don't have any interest in playing that game. But sometimes when you are looking for a student interaction and you notice the driver's not wearing a seatbelt, or you notice the driver, didn't do a railroad stop exactly correctly, it gives us a great opportunity to take that little clip, give it to our trainers, and send somebody back through retraining to say, notice you did this wrong. Maybe you forgot, let's do it again. Let's coach them. And just to ensure our driver behavior is accurate.
Did you struggle much with resistance from the drivers in implementing this technology, or how did that go?
No, they absolutely love it. And most of the time they'll come to us and say, hey, can you pull my video because I think I saw this, but I'm not sure. Or the kids were acting really funny in row 15. I don't know what they were doing, and we'll pull it up and look. So far this year, we've been in session about the middle of July. We've pulled over 180 video clips so far just this year, looking for things.
So 3 months. That's several times a day. Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. You mentioned navigation was important.
Yeah, when I talked about, driving with the old paper map and holding it out here and trying to do like this, when we started down this technology road, the navigation's the biggest thing that was on my mind. Because I thought, every time you send a sub driver out and he's reading a map, he's late. And in our district, the way we have it set up, we do high school first and then elementary and then middle school. And if you're late on the high school run because you don't know that route, now you're later for the elementary. Now you're really late for the third tier, And so navigation kind of took that all away. If we can just tell anybody if they're brand new on the route, just follow the instructions. Turn where it says turn, stop where it says stop, and there'll be kids there. and it really helped our on-time service on those runs that you have to cover at the last minute.
Anything specific implemented there is from a compliance standpoint? You know, a lot. I think it's pretty common to not allow drivers to interact with the tablet. Are you locking that down so they can't do so? Is that?
Yes, like I said before, with Arizona not having current laws, that was one of the stipulations they made, is you can have the tablet, it can talk to you, it can show you what's going on, but you're not able to interact with the tablet as you're driving.
No.
So it's literally like if you mounted your cell phone to a cradle somewhere and you could hear it and see it, but you can't use it as you're driving.
Okay.
So the student riderships, we've kind of struggled with that at first. We've been doing it for a little over a year now. Last year was almost an acclimation period. We asked everybody to do it, but we got a lot of pushback from the schools not wanting to enforce it. And then the kids don't want to do it. And some kids are too cool to have a badge. And, you know, the whole thing kind of got that way. The first of this year, we enacted a policy where if you're at the school and you don't have a badge, we're going to not give you a ride home. We're going to turn you back to the school. So the drivers say, no badge, no ride, you're back off the school. They're still in school custody. So it's not like we're leaving them alongside the street somewhere, but then they have to go to the office and call their parents. It only took about 3 days and the compliance numbers went just off the charts. Now everybody has a badge all of a sudden.
Mm.
So it worked really well. I think last week we scanned 73,500 times. So we're not all the way there, but we're getting close. You know, it's closer all the time. The other part about with the Here Comes the Bus app is if the student downloads it on their phone, there's their barcode in their app that they can scan from their phone, or they can take a picture of their barcode, they can scan it that way. And it just, the technology makes it much easier. They might lose their little badge, but they'll never lose their phone.
Do you see the scanning as primarily a safety issue that we're, you know, where it's certain it's the right kid in the right place? Is that kind
of? Yes, and it's absolutely a safety issue, but it's like you know, somebody calls up, my kindergartner didn't make it home. And well, what bus was he on? I don't know. Well, you know, where do you go? I don't know. Where do you get off? I don't know. Now we can say, well, he got on this bus and he got off there and he got off with these other kids. And usually you call the other kids and, oh, they're in my front room playing games, you know, or something. They went home with a buddy. They went home with a friend, something like this. We can pinpoint that so much faster with that data, because now I can tell you what stop he got off, what time he got off, and who he got off with. And usually the teacher or the mom will know who they're friends with, and a couple of phone calls will find them.
Okay. On the parent app, it's our branded app, Here Comes the Bus. And aside from the students actually utilizing it to scan their barcodes to go on and off the bus, any other uses for that parent app communications wise? Or
it's probably used more by the SPED parents than by the Gen Ed parents. And it works out really nice. It will give you kind of like a heads up when the bus is getting close. You can set the parameters of how far or close you want to do it, but you set it for 2 miles, and that way in the morning, you know, you've got a heads up, the bus is coming. Hey, get your shoes on. Let's get out to the curb. They're not standing at the curb waiting. They're not, you know, hoping a bus comes that doesn't come. They can look at the app and they can see exactly where the bus is, what route he's taking, and when he'll be there, you know, with an ETA. And especially in Arizona, it gets damn hot, you know, and even early in the morning, sometimes it's way over 100 degrees, or midday runs, it's 115. And now your kid's not standing out on that hot sidewalk waiting for a bus. Now they can stay inside the AC, get a heads up, and when they walk out to the sidewalk, the bus is coming down the street and no wait time. So that was huge. The other part about the bus is we're using, they call it cancel a ride, where or parents can get on and cancel the ride for the kid for the next day or that day or whatever. And that saves the phone calls. It saves just the general pain in the tail of the whole situation.
Yeah. So on that calls volume point, I just noted you said maybe 200 phone calls for 4 people in the morning. That seems like quite a deluge of information coming at them. So yeah, I'm glad to hear this is of benefit to your team.
Well, and we're getting about 40 to 45 call offs a day on that cancel ride. So, it knocks that 200 down to 150 pretty fast. And that's an amazing amount. And I think as we keep pushing it and we keep utilizing it, we'll get it up into the 50, 60 range pretty fast.
Great. Okay. Going back to inspections, you want to touch on that?
Talked about the paper pre-trip things and stuff like this. Doing it on the tablet is so much nicer. We do a regular pre-trip just like, DOT tells you to do, and in our case, DPS, but then you enter it in the tablet. And we enter the mileage in, we enter what happened and what you find and stuff like that. And it lets you adapt the pre-trip to what you want to adapt it to, so things are important to you, you can put on there and you can customize it. The part that's nice is when they fail something, it goes right to the shop right then. The shop knows, they create a work order on it, and they can be fixing it within minutes rather than by the end of the day, they turn in the piece of paper and somebody sorts it, and then it gets to the shop and then they have to sort it. And, it might be a day or 2 to fix a light bulb, where this way they know within minutes. So that has helped a lot to the managing the maintenance part of it. The other part is compliance with DPS or DOT, depending on where you're at. We know who's done their pre-trips. We know when they did it, how they did it, how long it took them to do it. Everything else is in there. It is so much cleaner and easier. You have a file on a computer instead of literally cases and cases and cases of paperwork. Yeah. It's nice.
Great. Getting back to the stop arm violations.
Okay.
I guess
we've kind of taken a different approach because we can't use the stop arm cameras and we can't seem to get law enforcement to help us. We've ended up adjusting a lot of the routes and making the buses go on the side streets and not doing the major artery stops. Put them on a street that has 20 mile an hour, 25 mile an hour speed limit and 1 lane. It's hard to get around that bus. If you stop on the major artery with 3 lanes in each direction and everybody's running 50 mile an hour, sometimes they just don't stop, So we kind of, like you said, a Band-Aid solution. We've kind of moved it off of the main arteries as much as humanly possible.
Okay.
Just to avoid that.
Gotcha.
Oh, the driver messaging. One of the features that we found with this technology was a direct message to the bus. And it wasn't that important in my eyes when we first started, but it's gaining importance every day. We use it a lot. When those phone calls come in and they say little Johnny's not writing, the dispatch team will send a message right to the bus and say that person's not writing or this is not writing, and it comes in a text message. They can't get it while they're driving, but they get it as soon as they pull up to a stop sign or anything else, it'll pop in. But then the name is not confused over the radio chatter. Did you say Tom or did you say John? Like this, it comes through, it's typed in correctly. There's no dispute about what was said. You've got a record of it. The other thing I use it for is a lot of team building. I'll put out messages on, Fridays and say happy Friday, or have a great spring break coming up, or, recognizing the veterans this week, or, something like this, and just use it so that everybody kind of gets the same message at the same time.
Mm.
And then the other part of it is, if you do have to have, a driver come to your office for not a pleasant conversation later, you can send him a discreet message right to his bus and say, hey, come to my office as soon as you're done. And the whole world doesn't have to know that you called him in. It's just between you and that driver, and that's it. Yeah. So the discreet communications really has been helpful.
I see. So one-to-one as well as one-to-many communications are helpful in that regard.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, that's all that we have on this side, unless there's anything else you think we missed. I do want to thank you very much for your time and your contribution today, Trace. And I hope this has been as informative and enjoyable for the audience as well as it has been for me. Again, thank you so much for your time, and I wish you a great day.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.